Hey, what's good, everybody? Today I wanted to make the video about the lizard. I guess the lizard is one that escapes me, no pun intended, quite often because I guess you see it a lot that sometimes, right, that you don't even notice it. But just like with the snake, I mentioned how a lot of strange things were happening. So the lizard, as well as an animal that usually hibernates during the winter, but yesterday, actually, I was in the mountains and I saw just an exaggerated amount of lizards that I hadn't been seeing. Like, I went for a mountain bike ride and I had to swerve because there was just so many just coming out, like boom, 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 out of nowhere. That I was like, whoa, like I didn't want to run them over, right? Like, and so I noticed them. I was like, okay, I guess that's the spirit animal for today. If you heard my other videos, right, it's all about what the spirit animal that's coming out to me. Actually, it had been the vulture. I saw the vulture, and they're both kind of tied in to me. But I'll do the vulture one next, probably, right? So with the lizard, when I used to go to sweat ceremony, like the person whose property it was, like they had lizards. Like right when you walk in, there's like a lizard. Like stones made of like stones that form a lizard, basically, like on the ground, right? It looks awesome, like the way they did it. So to them, lizards had to do with luck. And so I always knew that because I asked them. I was like, oh, that's crazy, because I had never really associated myself with the lizard or seen a lot of people. Like, I know lizards are very common in artistic works and this and that, but I guess to be in a spiritual setting and see someone so that has so much affection towards lizards, I wanted to know why, right? And I believe they told me a few things then, but I probably didn't pay attention to too much aside from the luck, right? So the lizard's been there around for a while, right? Another funny thing about yesterday was because it was Christmas Day, right? So they invited me to this thing, and that's what it also represents, like old friends, right? In some cultures, it represents old friends. And I saw just a ton of people that were like, "Hey, it's been years," or this and that. So it was interesting that ended up happening. That lizards can mean an old friend, and they were just popping out like boom, 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 boom. Like as I was going, there was just a lot that I was like, "Whoa, okay, this is weird." And later on that night, I ended up running into all these people, the same, right? This, hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. Hey, I haven't seen you in a long, like so many people. So it was pretty interesting, right? Um, so another thing, like I said, usually they come out of hibernation in the spring. So obviously it has to do with that healing, right? Like they're able to take that time to heal. The world disappears. Um, there's no rush. Like it's a reminder, I guess, when the spirit animal too is to it's okay to take that time to regenerate, right? And also, I mean, the magic of a lizard is like it also represents sacrifice, but the fact that it could lose its tail, if you've ever seen, they'll lose its tail and grow it back, and they'll lose the tail in order to escape a predator, right? If they're about to die, they can sacrifice the tail, like boom, like they'll even imagine they sacrifice a body part to survive getting killed, right? And they know it's gonna grow back. So what does that mean, right? Right now it's very, I'll try not to go into too many personal stories, but it's like, you know, when I was going through a change, and I'm still going through changes, right? But and I've been feeling it coming, right? But when there was a time in my life when I was going through a lot of changes a few years ago, this song kept popping out to me. I mean, if you're familiar with the spiritual, you'll know how they'll communicate with you through songs too, right? But this song started popping in my head out of nowhere, and it was an old song from that group Bone Thugs and Harmony that said, "There's always something you gotta give up if you want everything you want," and it just kept coming. So I finally downloaded it because I was like, and I started listening to it, and so the lizard kind of has the epitome of that energy. Like it's just about sacrificing something to get where you need to get, and knowing, having the confidence that it's gonna come back to you, right? Another thing that kept popping out to me during that time was like the book of Job, right? Job lost everything, and eventually, got it all back. I guess because when you live in a pure way, like you should have that confidence, right? Like knowing, like I know, like sometimes, I mean, in this life, from what we see with our eyes, we can say that bad things happen to good people, and it's just not right. It's not fair. But at the same time, also, there's that time when you walk in a good way, and like you don't deserve the bad stuff, right? So you can have that confidence that as long as you keep heading towards those goals, you'll get it back, right? And I mean, since the lizard is thought of to be like it's kind of traveling between both worlds, right? Not it travels between both worlds, not just because of the water and earth kind of I think I forgot to mention that with the snake, right? How the water and earth, so they're between both worlds, right? And so the lizard has that same capability, right? It's like, I think in some cultures it says like it travels beyond time and space, which maybe that's part of the magic why it could regrow limbs and all that, right? Like it makes it this cosmic being. Because how many animals do we know? I mean, the snake sheds its own skin. I think the lizards shed their own skin as well. But also the fact that it can grow back limbs is just amazing, because not too many other creatures can do that. We heal ourselves, right? Like we heal when we're cut and this and that. So in a way, we're growing back stuff like that. But if we cut off a limb, it's pretty much gone. I mean, it'll heal, but it won't grow back like the lizard, right? But also, like maybe because of that, right? Like the way they're able to appear in places, right? Like they slip through the cracks. I think that message came out to me too, because in my life, I would I would sometimes appear in places and people would trip out like, "Wait, how are you here?" Like, because maybe it seemed like they had to work hard to get in that place. But of course, maybe they just didn't know my story, right? Maybe because the lizard represents the southiness too, right? So, and you see, they slip through the cracks. They're in somewhere, and you're like, "Whoa, how did you get in here?" Right? Like they'll be in your house all of a sudden on the wall, and you're like, "Wait a second, how did the because other creatures." And that's the magic of the little creatures, right? Like you don't you pay them no mind, like they're insignificant. But imagine that a spider or a little ant could, a person could build this fortress, right? Oh, I'm gonna keep all these things out, and this little creature will slip in through the cracks, and there it is, right? A little ant, a little spider, a lizard, and it's like, then it shows you the relevance, right? Like I think there was the saying of like, I think in the Bible it talks about how the lizard is, oh, you could grab a lizard in your hand, but they're in the king's places, right? So imagine the power of that statement. The king could have all these guards and all this, and they could catch a lizard, but yet it'll appear in his chamber, right? Like the lizard has that ability. So obviously tied into you, it definitely ties back to luck, right? When you see the lizard, it's like it can show you that you're in an abundant time, right? Where you're gonna, an old saying is a handful of luck is better than a lifetime of wisdom or something, because sometimes that's all you need, right? The luck. And like I said, I think when I had experienced stuff like that, it was like I would be in these recording studios that it seemed like someone, and they'll be like, "Hey, what's up?" And then for some reason after that, it would connect me with people, because they're like, "Well, if he's in here, then he must be important or something, or how did he get in here?" But it would just be luck, right? I would just know somebody. Hey, I guess since I got along with people, maybe that was my lizard luck, right? Like it was like I'm just cool with people, and then they'll invite me. Hey, you want to go to the studio with me? And then next thing you know, I'm meeting people there, like people that other people are working hard to meet. You know what I mean? So things like that, like and so yeah, it's almost a stealthiness, right? Like you don't so tied into your life. It could be that you're in that time right now, or to pay attention, because if you get that opportunity, it might not come again. So take advantage if you're seen. So first of all, right, like you might be getting the message from the lizard. It might be appearing to you, and maybe you're just the same. You're thinking it's irrelevant. It's a little lizard. Who cares? But it could be right before a time of of that luck, right? Like yesterday, it made perfect sense to me. Like I said, the thing with friends, and I know about the sacrifice, right? I've experienced it time and time again, and I am in that mode. I'm not gonna get too personal, but I know there's things that, including people, right? Sometimes you let go of people, and maybe you think, maybe you've even grown an attachment to the certain people, but it's just time to let those people go, right? It's either a toxic relationship, or people that you don't really need to be around, but there's a bigger purpose, and it's not just like, oh, they're insignificant, they're just not part of your story anymore, right? And so the lizard is a great energy to tap into when you're having that problem of letting go, because it's gonna be replaced with something, just as good, as long as you're in that righteous space, right? Like yesterday I had an incredible time with him, but it always happens to me. So it was someone that I was talking to, that I'm planning to have as a guest on my podcast. But we were talking about, like, I don't ever think I've had a spiritual talk with this person like that in depth, but we went into it, and we were talking about all this stuff, right? And so even about that, like how I think he told me a story about someone, because I told them an experience I had about having to. There was someone, I was in a ceremony, and it came to me, and I just knew that if I died at that moment, there was one person in the whole world that I had this kind of resentment for. And so I reached out to them. I sent them a message like, hey, you know what? Um, like, I'm just letting go of that, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they did or what this and that, nothing. It just matters that if you were walking in a righteous way, then it'll be replaced, right? Whatever thing someone did to you, it's fine. It's gonna be replaced, and you don't want to hold on to that resentment because it holds you down, right? It's like that. Like, imagine the lizard trying to run away from a predator. It's holding onto its tail, and it's being like, no, I don't want to let it go. But it's almost like, I know it's weird to explain, but it's almost like a spiritual death to me. Like, even the resentment, the little bit of resentment you can hold on towards someone, could be like a spiritual death to you. You just don't see it, the ripple effect it's causing. But at some point, and even him, he's like, wow, like, because I shared that story with him about that. It hit me in the ceremony that if I died at that moment, I didn't want to leave this earth holding on to even that one bit of resentment, because I felt in the spirit world, it's like at that moment in the ceremony, something told me that in the spirit world it was gonna affect me. Like, I would be still dragged down by that one resentment, even though it's just one person that I could think of that I had resentment towards. And they shared a story about how someone reached out to them after 11 years because they were carrying something, I guess, negative that they did towards them, and they just had to apologize. And to them, it was like, oh, it didn't even bother me. But they were like, yeah, after 11 years, this person reached out to me just to let me know, and then we never spoke again. But it was like, just that. So all that to say, I know I went off into something else, but I think it's really tied in just about that, right? It's it's sacrifice, but in a way that it could be in a whole, right, for the greater good kind of thing, like, definitely, right? But in a personal way, it's just a part of life, right? It's a part of life, and especially if the lizard's coming around and you're paying attention to it, then maybe it could be about just in your life knowing that there's something that you got to give up, but you know it's gonna be replaced, right? So I also wanted to add this about the lizard, how it's so stealthy and it can camouflage basically to its environment, right? It blends in. It kind of ties, for me, it kind of ties into the multi-dimensional thing, right? Like, if you've read the old books, I don't know, it's probably not so much in the Bible, but in the book of Enoch, how the Watchers, right? So, there's always these beings watching us. I know maybe that might make you feel uncomfortable, who knows, but there's always something there. So maybe that's in a way how it's a multi-dimensional being, because there's always something watching us. It's just at a different frequency. But that's why certain people have those gifts, right? The ability to see, like, whatever, spirits, ghosts, whatever you want to call them, and they're they're here is just a different dimension, and whatever the rules are, right? I'm sure we all find out once we go. But according to these old books, it's like that, right? Like the Watchers, they're not really supposed to interact. Um, I remember this old movie of the Greek gods and how, obviously they were Greek gods, but they were watching and they'd intervene and help, but then between the gods they would get mad like, oh, you weren't supposed to help, so okay, I'm gonna help this person or something. It's pretty interesting. And to me, it's all the same, right? Every different culture just call them different things. Some call them gods, some call them watchers, some call them angels, higher beings, aliens, whatever you want to call them. But it's almost like that. So the lizard, they probably see these beings where we can't, right? Their eyes are probably able to see, just like a cat, right? A cat, we know that it can see into the spirit world and all that. So, I just wanted to add that. So, in your life, it could probably mean that you're taking on that energy, right? Of being able to blend into your environment, or telling you that it's time to be adaptable, to blend in. Maybe it's not a time to stand out. Maybe it's a warning for you, right? It could be a warning, like I mentioned about, the predators, and it's willing to sacrifice a limb just to get away. Maybe it's not telling you to sacrifice, but at least just blend in. It's really not a time to stand out. If you feel that energy, right? To take on that protective stance of and I know it has a lot to do with protection, right? Maybe because of that, it has so many tools to to survive, right? It's definitely a survival, a spirit animal that's tied into survival, right? It could let go of a limb, right, just to survive. It could blend into its environment. It's really quick. So all these things have to do with protection. So it can be coming to you for the sole purpose of letting you know that you're protected, or that you have what it takes to stand your ground. If anything, like you are a very skillful being when it comes to being able to evade any obstacles that come your way, right? Or slipping through the cracks. Like they're probably showing you that you're super resourceful at this time. Um, I even as I'm saying that, I've just had an aha moment, right? Like I think sometimes we forget how resourceful we are, and what better, spirit animal than the lizard to help you tap into that, so that's pretty interesting. And yeah, maybe that's why it's associated with luck as well. Another thing, I think I tied in the stealthiness about it, right? How it slips through the cracks. So just the magic of it, to acknowledge that it appears in places that other people can't, right? So if you're noticing that about yourself, um, also about, like, in some cultures it represents that rain is coming, right? And I think, also that I was seeing it and it's supposed to rain. So, um, maybe that's like, I mean, it's no coincidence, right? To me, I've learned to not say things are a coincidence. But at this moment, I don't know what else I could say about the lizard. I think that's it, right? Like, I know what it meant for me then. I think it's obviously a very smart animal, and they're very evasive, right? Like it can actually escape things. Like it's really fast. It looks slow, it's just there, but then boom, it just takes off, right? So I think that's why it's thought of to be like, oh, here's a crazy thing, right? So when I was like that, when I looked up some of the meanings of it, because I know about the, regeneration, the common ones, right? The sacrifice, the this and that. Um, but when I was out, I was mountain biking, and when I looked down, I don't know why I had never really noticed that, but it reminded me of the movie Star Wars when they go into what is it, hyperdrive, or when they fly, right? When they go light speed, right? When they're traveling into light speed, and when I would look down, that's how the ground looked. I was like, what? Like I had never noticed that, like how the ground just looks like it. And then you look a little ahead, and it looks like when you're stopped, like right before they go into light speed. So it was giving this weird effect. It felt like that, right? Like I was time traveling as I'm going on this bike. I know it's weird. It's hard to explain. Maybe I'll put a visual of it so you can understand what I'm saying. But this was the effect, and I kept doing it because it looked so crazy. I was like, wow, how come I never noticed this? Like, this is amazing. And so in my head, I was in this little time traveling experience, right? And then the vulture came. So that's a whole nother thing, right? I'll make a video about that. But then later, on my way already heading back when I was on my mountain bike ride, um, the lizards started coming out nonstop, right? And I didn't know yet that they meant like that they're multi-dimensional, right? And so it could be that experience, right? You can be, because that person later that I talked to, we were talking about things like that, basically like other dimensional things. I don't know if they realized that. I know we were talking, like, I guess because there's a lot of people there, so we kind of were being interrupted. We didn't get into everything, but we were talking about these experiences, and I remember thinking like, okay, I'm gonna let them know like things that we're experiencing were probably like alternate realities in a way too. But I didn't get to dive into all that. But I'm planning to interview this person for the podcast, so but all that aside, I know I went into a lot of things. If you've seen my other spirit animal videos, that's kind of the way I tie it in usually, with personal experiences. But I'll end it there. um I'll put, like I do in all the other videos, little additional meanings of it that I might have left out, that I might have left out. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you. Peace.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sometimes you just feeling it, you know what I'm saying? You just feeling it. And I wanna feel this way forever.